Hi, my name is Steven and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be talking to you about life lessons learned part 12, things that I learned in my teens. So in these episodes, I'm going to share with you the lessons I learned along the journey of my life. Specifically, I will cover different aspects of my life now that I'm older, wiser, and can go back and think about what I could have done differently. The goal is to learn from my lessons and skip over the mistakes I went through, and make the most out of their own personal journey through my experiences. My teenage years, to put it frankly, was a challenge for me. And as you'll see, they were far from being a pleasant influence in my life. As I look back on it now in my mid-30s, they were a necessary step for me. For the most part of my teenage years, I was struggling and just trying to survive day by day. Although I do look back fondly on the summer months as they gave me respite from school. Although it's been 20 years since I started my teenage years, there are certain lessons that I've learned that's carried with me to this day. The big takeaway from that period of time is to have time and patience in whatever you're trying to accomplish. And that good habits in life can pay you many dividends in the future. Those realizations helped me to shape how I approach my life, and looking back on it now, I realize I have gratitude and fondness for learning that lesson. So hopefully these lessons that I've learned in my teenage years can also help you with your life. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my background, my lessons learned, and my general thoughts. And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, hit that notification bell if you like this content. And let's do this. I don't look back on my teenage years very fondly, and to be honest, I don't really want to revisit it. Unlike my 20s when I had a lot of freedoms, my teenage years were all about control and what I couldn't do. These were because of my parents and also the time allotted for school. But I do think it's important to go through the lessons that I did learn and that had a huge substantial impact in my life. Even from our disappointments and failures, we can learn something that'll shape our experience in the future. As I entered my teenage years, I had very little power or influence to change the circumstances around me. I moved schools in between elementary school and middle school, and that threw my life into chaos. It was my first taste in starting over somewhere new, and I hated making new friends again. And I really struggled in that new environment because I didn't have that established group of friends that I knew. And starting that new school, it was difficult for me to join existing groups that already had people that they knew. This period of my life also saw me spend a lot of my time in isolation playing video games. It was one of the ways that I was able to manage all the stress from school and having lack of friends. Looking back on it now, this wasn't as bad as it first seems. Having all that time independently away from other people taught me not to depend on others. And that meant that I was able to take more risks and chances in my 20s without people holding me back. Towards the end of my teenage years, I started to get a little bit more freedom and became bolder and more risk-taking as a result. Having access to a car and going to college by myself was the first step in me taking a bolder stance into the world. The arc of my second decade was tremendous, going from someone that depended on my parents completely to someone that can go out into the world and take risks. And it really formed the backbone of who I am today and how I approach this world. And it gave me the habits going into my 20s that I crucially needed. So here are my lessons learned. Number 1, pain is temporary, life is forever. High school was really painful for me, and the scars of those years only began to heal in my late 20s. This period was marked with a lot of frustrations in academics, personal relationships, and also self-discovery. But looking back on it now, those feelings that I had during that time was necessary for me to become who I am today. Many of those days in school, I just didn't want to go to school because I had problems and issues and they were hopelessly unsolvable. It was a trying time during my life, and some of the troubles and issues also bled into my 20s as well. The feeling of not really belonging to a group really affected my self-confidence and grades. And I used video games as a distraction from that painful experience. It was only in my mid-20s was I able to distance myself from my younger self. Nowadays, my life turned out fine, with all the issues and problems I had back then being resolved. Bullies, failed relationship, and low grades aren't an issue for me anymore. And the best part is that there's still plenty of life to look forward to. This challenging period might seem like a long time, but it was only a few years now looking back at it. That period of time really made an impression on me and forced me to become a better person as a result of it, to ultimately make myself a more confident and experienced person. Number 2, little habits matter. Habits that I started in my early teens have made a huge difference in my current life. And I would say that without those habits, it wouldn't have given me the life I have today. My ability to focus on something for long periods of time came as a direct result of me playing video games for hours on end. And I was able to build up that focus over practicing over many years. And also my need to reach out to people and make new friends came as a direct result of me not having a lot of friends when I moved schools. I basically conditioned myself to be proactive and to reach out to other people when I don't have those friends in my own life. Novel seeking was also a habit that I developed during this period of time to try to fit in with people that like different things. And over time, it became useful for me because I was able to branch out and do various different things and eventually like them. And crucially, not be afraid to try new things in my 20s or 30s. These habits were clearly born out of the adaptation to pain and suffering in my teenage years. And it became a huge helpful adaptation for me in my 20s and 30s. Even the fact that I didn't have a lot of friends in middle school helped me in the end when looking at it from a long-term perspective. Because I didn't have strong roots in my hometown, I was able to more readily branch out and find new roots. I was more free to move about the world with less regret. Although the formation of these habits weren't intentional, they were pretty lucky and advantageous for me, and gave me the permission to do things early on that even adults now struggle with, like meeting new people, trying new things, and taking risks. So early in life, the habits that I formed have helped me greatly in the rest of my life. Number 3, having control is an illusion. I tried really hard to control my life in middle school and high school to get the outcome that I wanted, by trying to get as many friends that I can and influence my surroundings. But the more I tried, the less successful I was at having control. And to my dismay, it actually worsened my life quality because of it. Looking back on it now, this was a really big lesson for me to learn, that control is ultimately an illusion. Because when I was young, I had very little power to influence my parents and the people around me. And my limited understanding of how the world works didn't help me in this regard whatsoever. And it was in those early failures of control that I slowly learned to back off from needing control. Although it has been a long and arduous journey for me to slowly let go of control. I grew up with a lot of uncertainty in my life, and so it made sense that I wanted to have more certainty and control in my teenage years. As I've aged, now I reflexively pull back whenever I feel like I want to control someone. Because at the end of the day, unless I have a personal stake in it, it's just not worth the hassle or time or energy. And being older just reinforces how little you can influence the world at hand. Because in every aspect of our lives, people on the other side will push back against you. So the big lesson that I learned in my teens was that control is ultimately an illusion. You can only really control a very limited subset of things in your life. Number 4, find mentors. One of the best lessons I learned in my teens was to find a good mentor and listen to them. You can gain a lot from older mentors by just asking a lot of questions about their lives. I don't think I could have learned more at that time in my life without talking to other people that were older than me. These people were teachers, friends, parents, or random people that I happened to meet. And each time they would talk about their lives, I would be very curious and study them. Many times they were very open about their own experience, and they were more than willing to share their lessons learned of their lives. Things that I would otherwise experience the hard way. The root of this really came from me having a sheltered background and my need to relate to others. I moved around a lot and I wanted to create another social network in that new area. Many people that I met during this time were in fact older than me though. I think that finding older people to look up to in your teens is very critical. They can help you navigate the wild periods of your teens and your 20s. And crucially, they can show you the mistakes that you need to avoid, especially in your 20s. Some people might even take you under their wings and help you succeed in life. And these are the people that really taught me the value of lessons learned from experience. Even now, I'm looking for mentors that are older, wiser, and can tell me more about their learned experience. But definitely it's become harder and harder to do so because I'm not meeting as many people as I would like. But nonetheless, it's a key reason of who I am today by finding great mentors in my teenage years. And number 5, life starts beyond school. The biggest lesson that I've learned is that life actually starts after school. In my teens, for whatever reason, I thought that school is life and life is school, and I didn't understand the concept of life after school. I thought that I was going to be beholden to social circles like I did in high school. But looking back on it now, school was a very unique period in my life, and I don't think I'll ever go back to that kind of lifestyle again, where you're forced to be with people that you don't actually click with and you don't have any choice of getting out of it. And crucially, everyone during that time is in their teens, so they're not fully grown and mature yet. In life, you actually have full control of whatever you want to do and when you want to do those things. You don't necessarily have 99% of your life controlled and in someone else's hands by the time you're an adult. And that to me at 15 was something completely arbitrary and that I had no understanding of it whatsoever. But by the end of my teenage years, I met people that were much older than me and had fully formed adult lives in their 20s. And that those people told me that life begins after school. But in some cases, if you're in school until your late 20s, then life can begin afterwards. Because at some point, school will end and you'll be out in the working world. So my lessons learned is that life opens up completely after school, and if you're still in school, just endure it. Know that it'll be better in the future. So here are my general thoughts of my lessons learned in my teens. I'm constantly amazed at how little school prepared me for actual life. Most of the things that I actively use day to day had nothing to do with what I learned in school. And crucially, even for my career, only about 30% of what I actually learned in school matters to me. Things like relationships, career, and financial advice didn't make its way to my curriculum. Even just one of these topics are very difficult to grasp for adults, but having all three not be included in your school curriculum is very bad. These are topics that I had to learn on my own during my own time, and many others that might not have the time to dig into it won't learn those lessons whatsoever. In my teens, I was mostly studying non-consequential things for a world that didn't exist for me, because life is not represented in academia like school is. And the tools that I learned as a teen were different for the success needed in life. I think it's a lost opportunity for children now and then to miss out on the opportunity of learning about life in school, and crucially picking those things up early in their development, especially in their teenage years. And lastly, I'm amazed at how my classmates from that period of time diverge in life circumstances. Some are very successful and lead solid lives, at least on social media, and others are struggling to get by and have quite dire lives. And this had no bearing on where they were in the hierarchy of the high school social structure. You can be successful in your teenage years but be a bum in your adult years. It did not correlate, at least in my classmates, whatsoever. So that means your life during your teenage years is not a true representation of where you'll be as an adult. Ultimately, it's up to you and the choices that you make in your own life. So those are my lessons learned from my teenage years. My teenage years were a defining period in my life in which I had a lot of challenges to face. But it gave me the lessons learned that stayed with me even to this day. I was growing at that time and my understanding of the world was very limited. But I was able to pick up on a few key habits that helped me to ingrain my lessons learned, that ultimately shaped who I am even 20 years later. So the key lessons learned are: pain is temporary, find mentors, and little habits matter. So I hope you learned some of the lessons I learned in my teenage years and adapt them to your own lifestyle. So thank you for watching. Please leave me a comment down below on what you learned in your teens and whether that was a good experience for you or not. And I'll see you next time.